what about, I mean, but there's real pain. I mean, grocery prices are up 30%, more than 30%. Since the beginning of the pandemic, and people are spending more on food and groceries than they have at any time really in the past 30 years. I mean, that's a real day-to-day pain that people feel.
It really is, and it's real. But the fact is that if you take a look at what the people have, they have the money to spend. It angers them and angers me that you have to spend more. For example, the whole idea of this notion that Senator Casey talked about, shrinkflation. I think it's on your
Same
program.
price for a smaller bottle of juice or something.
For example, Snickers bar, they did a thing, and it's like 20% less for the same price. That's corporate greed. That's corporate greed, and we've got to deal with it.
He actually has the audacity to say other people are greedy. This is the guy who made you share the burden of some rich kid's college tuition. And don't think that it's not rich kids, because we broke those statistics down for you that were from the government. They're publicly available on this contraption called the Webernets. And we broke those statistics down for you. It's like kids, it's like people who are going into like getting grad school degrees and all this stuff. Like it's the academic aristocracy that you're subsidizing. And he did that, but yet he has the audacity to say that companies that have to spend more for the materials required to make their products, and they have to pass that cost off because they're not just going to eat it, because they also have bottom lines to make. He says that's greed. Wow. That's like that meme where the two Spider-Men are pointing at each other. What in the world? Welcome back to the program. Dana Loesch with you, bottom of this first hour. Who is they when he's like, they have the money to spend? Who is that? Who's they? Are you they?
I'm not they.
Are we they?
No.
I'm not they. I was just telling them my butter went up again. The butter that I like, that Land O'Lakes butter that I get, I don't even get the benefit of having the Indian on it. And it, as Kane pointed out so helpfully, made me mad now. We got time for those fights, but not for these economic battles. No, he's like, this was his let them eat cake answer. Holy wow. He's like, well, the market responding to my economic policies is just corporate greed. The greed is you demanding that money you didn't earn is yours to spend on bills that other people accrued. That's greed. If we're to have a conversation of what is greed. Jeez. So I guess they is us in this. There's more too, I know. There's more here too. Because so he mentions that whole, because the thing with the candy bars, why does he always go back to that? I mean, everything that everybody's they're having to repackage and repurpose everything because prices are so expensive. And prices are expensive for even the materials, the raw materials that are used to make the products that he's complaining about. Either he has no idea how his policies actually trickle down, and that's a real thing, and affect the average everyday person, or he just had another stroke in his interview. I don't know. One of the two. And that's it. When you think of, consider inflation is making it to where the dollar doesn't stretch as far. Things are more expensive. Do they expect companies? I was talking, for instance, the lady who cuts my hair. I was talking to her, and she was explaining how, especially for her clients who, when she has to bleach their hair. Like apparently women who get their hair bleached, oh my gosh, their prices for their hair maintenance is just out of control. Dudes are like, oh, what? But listen, she was explaining to me in detail how the certain chemicals that she purchases, how much it has increased, by dollar amount, very, very specifically, how much that has increased just every year since 2020. And then she's like, now do the math on this. If I'm having to buy X amount and it's increased X amount, here is an additional X amount of dollars that I have to pay a month. I can't just eat that. She's like, I have to then increase the prices for my services to include the increased prices for these materials that I have to purchase in order to perform my services. And she was like, and I was talking to the rep of this one, I guess, company that does hair dye or something. And she was saying that their raw materials have increased in prices. And she said they even gave us this sheet that explains how their raw materials to make the dyes and stuff that we use, how and why they have increased month per month, and how now that trickles down to us because we have to pay more for that product, and then ultimately it's the consumer that has to pay more because you can't expect the proprietor or the practitioner to just eat the cost. Expecting someone else to do that is greed. That's the definition of greed. Trying to be generous with someone else's money is the definition of greed. Assuming that someone owes you something and has to pay your bills is the definition of greed. Demanding that hardworking Americans can incessantly pay your spending, your big spending budget, that's greed. And so that's why we're in this position. It was fascinating though when she was explaining to me, just the item per item cost increase. And she was like incurring, you're talking like hundreds of dollars extra in expense a month. She was running like upwards of like almost $700 in extra expenses a month because of the amount of clients that she has, the services that she does, and how expensive everything has gotten. It's wild. Like even they were saying sharpening their scissors is even everything's getting more expensive because it's expensive for everybody. That's not corporate greed. That's Joe Biden's policies. And I guess you could define Joe Biden's policies as greed. That's how I would define every Democrat economic policy. Audio soundbite 1, listen to him trying to gaslight you on the economy's better and everybody knows it. Do you believe this? Listen to this. Audio soundbite 1. This is insane.
It's also true right now, Mr. President, that voters by a wide margin trust Trump more on the economy. They say that in polls. And part of the reason for that may be the numbers. And you're aware of many of these, of course. The cost of buying a home in the United States is double what it was when you look at your monthly costs from before the pandemic. Real income, when you account for inflation, is actually down since you took office. Economic growth last week, far short of expectations. Consumer confidence, maybe no surprise, is near a 2-year low. With less than 6 months to go to Election Day, are you worried that you're running out of time to turn that around?
We've already turned it around. Look at the Michigan survey. For 65% of American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape. The polling data has been wrong all along.
How has the polling data been wrong? That's what I don't understand. What do you mean the polling data has been wrong?
We have the strongest economy in the world. Let me say it again, in the world.
Although GDP last week was far short of expectations.
Oh, it wasn't. Look, GDP is still growing. Look at the response of the markets.
Yeah, look at him. I like how he goes, the world. Like that makes a difference. Oh, I took you way more seriously when you said world than world. That, Mr. President, makes all the difference in the world. All the difference. But this is the lie that he's been pushing over and over again. And he's really trying to downplay because he can't talk economy. He can't talk border. What is he going to talk about? He keeps having to say, no, audio soundbite 6. No, people, I'm fine. People aren't going to make up their minds to fall until the fall. Yes and no. Listen to this.
I'm feeling good about the trajectory of the campaign. And you know as well as I do, most people don't really focus and make up their minds till the fall. There's a lot going on. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's not entirely true, though. A lot of people start making up their minds before then. Yes, you do have elections that are determined in the margins, but a lot of people still make up their minds way earlier than that. And so what he's saying here doesn't necessarily ring true. Furthermore, he's just not doing well polling wise. But I'm going to say something you're going to probably think is unpopular. I'm more concerned about Trump being tied with Biden than anything else, because if Biden, which I think, I wasn't there for Carter. That's why I asked everyone not too long ago, if you lived through Carter, compare for everybody. Give all of us the perspective that you have through your experience and compare what you lived through with Carter to what you're living through with Biden now and tell me who's worse. And it's fascinating because there were thousands of responses and I went through as many as I could, but I kept the answers were all the same. Everyone thinks the people who lived through Carter and now are living through Biden think that Biden's worse, but they felt like Carter was somehow not excusing him, but less malicious, right? Is I guess the summation, like not that he was innocent, but he didn't have, it wasn't a priority, the objective to just destroy the economy the way they really feel that it is with Biden. And I get it, because some of the moves that I see Biden taking are just, I mean, they're destructive. Although I can't get past, and I've read 2 different biographies on Carter now. I can't get past his involvement in the Middle East, to me, is malicious. Whereas Biden is worse with the economy and a lot of domestic issues, and he's really bad with foreign policy. Maybe I'm just looking through the biased lens of history here. I would just think that creating the disaster in the Middle East maybe takes precedent, right? Does that make sense, Kane? Like maybe creating all of this with the Shah and all that, maybe that kind of takes precedent. I don't know. But regardless, my concern is that, and I'm looking at some of the latest surveys here, and you're going to start seeing more and more. If Biden is the worst president ever, why in the ever-loving hell is Trump tied with him? And a statistical dead heat. Now, I still think and I'm very picky on what surveys I look at and what I take. Like if I go to RCP, they average in everything. I don't necessarily think you should take everything because some of them are push polls. Some of them are designed just to get a specific answer or a specific representation for a specific narrative. We talked about this before. But why, if Trump is so much better, and I'm not saying this as an accusation, I'm asking this, how in the world can people think, how are they tied? Because the economy under Trump was better. The foreign policy was better. Granted, his administration was spending like crazy before lockdown, before COVID. That's a fact. And I had said before lockdown, you can go back in my archives, and I've even written about it, that Republicans have got to get a handle on spending. Otherwise, Democrats are going to say that the tax cuts, and this was at the time when the Trump administration was proposing tax cuts before they passed them. It was temporary for non-businesses. But I had said that they're going to argue, Democrats are going to use the incessant spending plus the tax cuts to say that tax cuts cost, and we're going to have to either expire tax cuts earlier or hike taxes up altogether in order to offset the government spending. So that is something that is not up for debate. That happened. But even then, we still had lower taxes. We still had a more robust economy. It's one of the reasons why we were able, as we were emerging from lockdown, which we never should have gone through, which is a bad economic decision. As we were emerging from lockdown, it's one of the reasons why we weren't completely gutted before Biden took office. But he's still statistically tied. That is not good, guys. You cannot have somebody like Joe Biden be tied with you. And where I'm looking at, I think the most important surveys that I've been looking at are the blue wall states, where you have Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. Wisconsin, I was looking at Wisconsin. I mean, Biden's job approval, 39 to 56% approved to disapprove, respectively. And this is wild. It's so bad.